This is the end of the beginning. Welcome to today's show. This is an important episode. It is July 2023. And as most of you should know, I've covered it many, many times over on previous channels, of course, which are no longer in existence. I mean, some other YouTuber did, about FedNow and about the central bank digital currency. The rollout is about to begin, and everybody needs to be aware of this because most people are so dumbed down. What they hear are the little things that the government flashes in front of their face, little caveats, right? They go, oh, did you know that with the central bank digital currency, you don't have to pay transaction fees anymore? You know that fee you pay PayPal or that fee that you pay when you withdraw cash? There won't be that anymore. And everyone goes, yay, sounds great. That's fine. Anyway, they don't realize that what this means, the central bank digital currency, is really the epitome of the Great Reset and everything that most people have been hearing about but seem to have a hard time understanding. Owning nothing and being happy. You won't even own your money. Now, people are like, we don't own the money anyway. You just get it. You don't. No, you own it technically. Technically, your money that's in the bank is your money that's in the bank. And your neighbor's money that's in his bank account, that's his, right? So if you went over to your neighbor and you took their money, you go to jail for stealing, right? Well, with the central bank digital currency, the government is in control of your money. The government decides how you spend your money. And as you're about to hear from the World Economic Forum, who just spoke last week in China, and as you'll see how China operates and runs, because all the liberals in this country want us to turn into China, and they don't realize that they're slaves in China. And when you hear the people in China talk, you could realize you could actually see what a real human zombie is. These people are completely mind controlled to a point of, I don't even know if there's brains inside their bodies. So we'll get into all that as quickly as I possibly can so I can show you these things, share this with people, wake them up to what FedNow is. This is not some PayPal thing. This is government surveillance, government monitoring. And you might be like, well, you know what? That's fine. I don't do anything wrong. That's how they want you to think. The reality of it is, if you speak against the government, as you'll see, if you say something that they might not agree with, if you say something that hurts somebody's feelings, they have the ability to freeze your bank account. And as you're about to hear from the World Economic Forum stooge himself, they talk about how, for example, they could make sure you don't buy ammunition, pornography, or drugs. Yeah, maybe pornography or drugs, maybe that's a good thing to prevent, but ammunition? You see where this is headed? Take a look.
And the one final note I will make is that if you think about the benefits of digital money, there are huge potential gains. It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability, units of central bank currency with expiry dates. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it as a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like, say, ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC, where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like, say, ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC.
So this is government overreach, but more so it's government control. The FedNow, the removal of cash, gives the government full control over our finances, over our decisions. And just like we see with free speech on the internet, we see what the government does to people in regards to giving a crap about any of us making money, being able to feed our families, being able to feed ourselves, providing things that are normal that we all should be allowed to do in a free country. What do we see? Well, the government's taking jobs away from people if they don't put poison in their body. We saw the last couple of years. The government is, eliminating voices on YouTube. The government's deciding who can have a voice and who can't have a voice, demonetizing, deplatforming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. And of course, this ends with people not being able to buy guns, not being able to buy ammo, not being able to leave states that they're in, not being able to leave cities, smart cities that they're stuck in, which are really prison cells, all of this. So let's start. Here's a little education on the FedNow currency and what it looks like.
The Federal Reserve might want to fix your wallet by turning it from this into this. Though your wallet is still designed for dollar bills, Americans have been using cash to buy things less and less over the years. That's part of why the Fed is considering digitizing the US dollar, giving people money they can access on their phone and bypassing electronic payments that can be slow and costly for businesses. Some see this as a necessary upgrade to the US financial system, but others worry it could potentially upend commercial banking.
There are some very, very difficult questions to answer, but I think we are engaged in a serious program to understand both the technology and the policy issues.
A central bank digital currency, or CBDC, is exactly what it sounds like: a purely digital form of a country's money issued by its central bank that people can use just like cash. It's true that cards and apps already allow for electronic payment, but behind the scenes, these financial transactions involve several steps, settling payments over a patchwork of systems.
The plumbing of the system is still based on a cash system.
Josh Lipsky is the director of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center and says the US financial system is still pretty old school when it comes to moving money around. After a debit card is swiped, the transaction can flow through several entities, including point-of-sale systems, payment networks like Visa and MasterCard, your bank, and the merchant's bank. The system can take up to 3 days to move money between accounts, and often comes with transaction fees that can weigh heavily on small businesses, who experts say may have to pass the cost onto customers or put restrictions on card usage. These extra costs can limit their revenues and customer base. CBDCs could bypass this system, allowing digital money to flow directly between two people, in the same way you hand over cash at the register. One method the Fed is considering is issuing digital wallets to Americans directly, or through commercial banks or other financial service providers. The digital dollars themselves would be no more than computer code, possibly stored on a central ledger at the Fed or on a distributed ledger like many cryptocurrencies. When you use your wallet to pay for something, the Fed would take the digital cash out of your wallet and deposit it into the merchants, simplifying the process and doing it without fees. These could be done through an app on a phone, or for those without smartphones, an SMS text message or debit card. Besides frictionless payments, a digital dollar could help the 8.4 million unbanked households who don't have a debit or credit card and can get left behind in a cashless world. For example, instead of mailing checks, the government could deposit your tax refund or stimulus payments directly into your Fed wallet, making the money available immediately. Proponents also say CBDCs offer a much more effective tool for central banks to enact monetary policy. Right now, the Fed influences interest rates across the entire economy by setting borrowing rates between banks, known as the federal funds rate. But this is often a fraught process that doesn't always produce the desired results.
The Fed sets this benchmark rate and other private banks are supposed to queue off it, and then your mortgage is supposed to queue off it. Does that really work? How much time does it take? And the answer that economists will tell you is it works, but there are probably more efficient ways to transfer monetary policy.
Economists believe that if the Federal Reserve were to assign interest rates to the money stored in digital wallets, it would be much more effective at influencing economic decision-making at the household level. According to a January survey, 60% of central banks around the world are currently experimenting with CBDCs. The Bahamas was the first country to release a digital currency, called the Sand Dollar, in October 2020. And China has been developing and testing a digital version of the yuan. But there are questions about how a digital currency would work in the US.
Legitimate digital public money could help drive out bogus digital private money. It could help improve financial inclusion, efficiency, and the safety of our financial system if that digital public money is well designed and efficiently executed, which are two very big ifs.
The recent rise of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and private currencies like Facebook's Diem have spurred central banks to explore CBDCs in an effort to keep pace. Experts say these alternative currencies expose the risk of money and payments circulating outside the watchful eyes of central banks.
This is a blind spot for them because when they're setting monetary policy, they like to know how much money is in circulation, broadly how that money is being used. And so that helps them understand the macroeconomics and the fundamentals of the economy at any given time.
But by keeping up with new competitors, CBDCs could threaten to leave traditional banking behind.
So if the Fed were to become a bank in a traditional sense and actually issue people money and hold people's money directly, then you might hold less money in your Bank of America app, and that would cut into their business model. So they have to think about how digital currencies affect their business.
Because of these issues, the Federal Reserve is still studying the scope and structure of how a digital dollar would work and how it could be integrated into the current banking system.
The Fed doesn't want to start dealing with 300 million customers overnight. They're not equipped to do that. So you don't want to call up the Fed at midnight and say, I forgot my password. This is not something the Fed wants to be doing or can do. So they need to think about who to work with to deliver digital dollars.
The Fed would also have to tackle privacy concerns over how anonymous digital dollar payments should be, and whether the money should be restricted to specific transactions or programmed to expire after a certain time period to encourage spending. It plans to release a discussion paper on the benefits and risks of a digital dollar this summer, and has said it wouldn't move forward without support from Congress. Many experts say the Fed will need to figure out a digital dollar to keep up with the pace of a rapidly changing global economy. What that looks like remains to be seen, but it could mean using this a lot less.
So look, that video right there is going to make people go, and I'm showing you that clip because people are going to see that and they're going to say, what's the big deal, right? I've constantly talked about over the years how the blueprint for what this country is China. They're creating a whole world of China, a communist world order, okay? Somehow we live amongst insane lunatics in America who think communism's great, mainly because they've failed over and over again at trying to make money in a capitalist country, and really that's because they're lazy, they're uneducated when they can educate themselves and they can work harder, et cetera, et cetera. They're not motivated by that. They're motivated by handouts, but they don't realize that it's not about handout. It's not about equality. It's not about everybody being equal and equal pay. These are all triggers that the government has created to make people want communism. It's about government control to a point where you won't be able to get food. You won't be able to live in an apartment or live anywhere without the government say so, knowing about it, and monitoring. This is what it looks like in China. Keep a close eye on the social score. Why is that important? Because the social score is going to be the ESG. That's what you've all heard, those terms, and people just go, I don't know what that means. It means, oh, for the environment. You're doing the right things for the environment. It's a tracking system. It's tracking your behavior. It's tracking what you can buy, et cetera, all the things I mentioned. And it's tracking where you can and can't go because your carbon footprint, we all have to protect the environment. There's no agenda here about you going out of state and it being too much of a carbon footprint. So you have to stay in your cell, aka your home, which is filled with all your smart devices where we're listening and monitoring 24/7, and you're under the illusion that you're free. Okay? Keep an eye on the social score. This is obviously going to benefit all the good little sheeple, all the good little zombies out there that comply, and do as they're told over and over again by this dictatorship. And then on top of that, listen to the story of the guy, of course, who just couldn't buy a train ticket because he was on a blacklist, of course, because he wasn't on board with everything the government was shoving down everyone's throats. Take a look at the horror that is soon to come to the world.
你们会用数字人民币不？
Huang Dan just paid with a new type of money at this pharmacy.
可以了，
That's because China's paper cash is going digital.
就是把你的钱包放到了手机里面。
The digital yuan is meant to be faster than using credit or debit cards on digital wallets like Apple Pay. Plus, there are other incentives, like zero transaction fees for merchants, and one day it'll even work offline. But one major difference is that the digital yuan is 100% trackable by China's central bank. And when it's launched nationwide, it could impact not only citizens, but also foreign companies operating in the country.
The central bank will know who's paying, how much they're paying, when they're paying, where they're paying, and then to analyze the patterns of payment.
China's central bank has also said it plans to gradually replace all cash and coins with the digital yuan. The country would be the first major economy to introduce a digital currency in the real world. And while many users say the digital yuan is easy to use, China's money revolution could usher in privacy concerns.
其实更多的场景还是会带手机。
Using the phone to pay isn't a new concept for Huang, since he's one of about 770 million mobile payment users in China who rely on digital wallets like Ant Group's Alipay and Tencent's WeChat Pay. These private tech firms hold data on transactions, which the government can access. But because the digital yuan is developed by the central bank, there are no third parties, and that data sits with the government.
它是用你的身份证号和姓名来去做登记的。
To begin testing the digital currency online and in physical stores, last year the Chinese central bank started doling out digital cash through public lotteries in cities across China. Huang is one of the 750,000 people who have won some piece of the $23 million prize in the past year. To start spending his $30 worth of winnings, Huang first downloaded the Digital Yuan app.
要不是商家来扫你的二维码，要么是你去扫商家的二维码。
It recorded that he spent money on lunch and medicine one Saturday afternoon in the southwestern city of Chengdu.
他现在每个商家的门口都会贴一个告示，对，就是他说我接受数字人民币。
About 10,000 merchants in Chengdu have signed up to accept digital yuan.
数字红包可以使用的。
Zhong Jiayin manages a dumpling restaurant, and she said the digital yuan has some advantages compared with other payment options.
现在就是多了一个付款方式嘛，而且他们不收手续费哦，我们肯定很乐意的。
For instance, two of China's most popular digital wallets charge merchants an average of 0.6% for every transaction. There's also another upside in the works. The central bank is planning to make transactions possible even without an internet connection. So restaurants like Zhong's won't have to worry about their spotty connections that sometimes make it hard to process digital transactions.
This digital yuan is less about money and more about data.
Yaya Fanusi is an adjunct senior fellow at the nonprofit think tank Center for a New American Security in Washington, D.C. He's been studying digital currencies for the past 6 years, and he says China's new currency is not as anonymous as it claims.
Central bank has talked about there being controllable anonymity, which really means it's anonymous horizontally, right? The users that are using it don't necessarily know the identity of everyone that they're interacting with. But vertically, it's not anonymous. The central bank is at the top with information on all the users.
China's central bank has promised to protect users' privacy. For now, people can choose whether they want to use the digital currency. But the central bank has said that as the country becomes a cashless society, it expects the digital yuan to become the primary way to make transactions.
The Chinese government could force Chinese companies to only accept payment in digital yuan, which would then force the foreign companies, their foreign counterparts for trade. It could ensure that they have to use that.
Central banks have authority to control money supply, but their actions to restrict a digital currency would have a more immediate effect, leaving companies holding that currency all the more vulnerable. For example, Fanusi says China's central bank could put an expiration date on the digital money, similar to how lottery winnings have to be spent before a certain date.
It means that the Chinese government could set up a whole lot of things to have your currency maybe valid or invalid based on its own priorities. This is almost like handing over the keys to your business or to your finance department in some ways, because you really can't control what at the end of the day may happen with the funds that you're holding.
While there are privacy concerns, Fanusi says digital currencies can create more efficient monetary policy and counter criminal activities. China's central bank said its digital yuan system would help combat money laundering, gambling, and terrorism financing.
我们会坚持中心化这管理。
Meanwhile, the central bank is also looking into ways to make international transactions possible in digital yuan. And Fanusi says there's a big variable that'll determine if that's going to work.
Will foreign governments allow their businesses and citizens to hold digital yuan and use it? It's not a given that all other countries are going to transact with this, and will, because of the privacy, the data issues. So this is really to be determined.
While there's no set date for a national rollout, some officials have said the digital currency could be ready for wider use next February during the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing.
I think there is an element of showing off for the big international audience. We have a central bank digital currency that we're using. We're the only country, the biggest country that's doing it.
And China isn't alone in this experiment. According to one survey of central banks, 86% of them from the US to Japan are exploring these types of currencies. For early digital yuan winners like Huang, he says the trial went smoothly, and if the currency does go mainstream, he expects the surveillance aspect will matter less to him.
就是你的便利和被监控的部分，它一定是会被让渡的。因为我觉得我的消费习惯已经被培养了之后，其实我很难摆脱这样的更便捷的支付方式吧。
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name. Now, the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points. A score in the 700s is considered good. Around the 500 mark is not. For now, the number is a sort of bank credit rating, keeping track of everyone's spending habits.
I think being ranked is a good thing. A society has to have rules.
It forces us to be well behaved.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
But in an effort to keep all of its subjects in line, Beijing is taking the system a step further in 2020. It's aggregating data gathered by banks, private companies, and the state to rate if someone's a good or bad citizen.
By using the most data possible, the so-called big data, the system will play an important role in rebuilding a moral society.
The state will go over every detail of a person's life with a fine-tooth comb. Their financial situation, spending habits, career, even behavior on social media. Criticizing the government online or displaying outward signs of wealth is a no-no. On the other hand, praising the party or giving blood increases your social credit. Xiaowen Wang is a model citizen. She lives in Nanjing, a testing ground for social ranking. Married with a child, she has a job in a retirement home, no debts, and she wouldn't dream of jaywalking.
As a good citizen, I respect the rules of the road. If I didn't, I'd lose points on my social credit.
In theory, everything can be taken into account in the social score, even the most innocuous errands like supermarket shopping. When Xiaowen Wang makes an electronic payment, her purchases tell the state a lot about her. Buying cigarettes would count against her. On the other hand, nappies show she's an attentive mother. Beer could indicate alcoholism. She'd be better off buying water. In this pilot city of 8 million people, there are only 18,000 model citizens. For Xiaowen Wang, there are perks to be had, such as paying half price for the bus.
I get discounts for all public services, even at museums. And the library is free for me, thanks to my score.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to zero. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. But he only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Liu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry, because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms, and all of us will live with restrictions of one kind or another.
After our meeting, Liu Hu learned that his name had been removed from the blacklist, but he still has a long way to go if he doesn't want to languish at the bottom of the social credit hierarchy.
So that's why it's so important to talk about FedNow, to talk about central bank digital currencies, and I'm going to continue to cover it. Canada is now willing to embrace the CBDC. Other countries are embracing it. The FedNow, the story that's out there with the FedNow, and the amount of countries that are on board to do this, I think it's 57 pilot programs are out there now. 195 countries in the world are on board with having their own central bank digital currency. And of course, the flip side of all of that is the destruction of the dollar. The dollar has to be killed off and destroyed. That's what's going to end up happening. They don't want you to have dollars, not because, people hear this stuff and they're like, oh, what's the big deal? I buy everything online anyway. What do I need cash for? They're so dumb. That's what they think of automatically. They're like, whatever, I usually do an online transaction with my credit card or with my PayPal, so what's the big deal? I don't have a bulky wallet in my pants anymore? They don't realize what this is. This isn't PayPal. This is government control of your finances. This is what you saw in Canada with the truckers, or at least the story we were told, whether it was real or not, that's to be debated, but how people who were protesting had their bank accounts frozen. What you just saw in China. This is a worldwide epidemic. This is going to be a worldwide totalitarian dictatorship, total control. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a result of a liberal world order. Everything is upside down. Okay, this isn't about liberating, this is about enslavement. And this is why the Democrats work so hard to empower stupid people, to use hate and all these terms to silence people who speak against them, because they don't want you realizing that they're playing you. They're playing you. And they need the people that they're playing to defend them. Otherwise, it's all of us against the small portion of them. But the liberals out there who are supporting communists, most of which are too brain dead to realize what it looks like, eventually, this system where people are like, well, I'm on board with what the government says. I mean, I'll be supportive of it. I'll have a great social score. They're going to turn on you too. They're going to turn on everyone once the system's in place. They need these Democrats, these liberal people, to help them get the system in place first. Then they will turn on them faster than you could say rice-a-roni, okay? So this is what we're headed toward. This is the horror. And the mindset of people out there is just what I said. This is the common person's brain. Well, I already spend money online. Oh, I'm not hiding anything from the government. Oh, I don't want to buy ammunition anyway. Oh, right. Oh, it's a good thing, right? Because they lumped in pornography and drugs with ammunition as if they're all comparable, apparently. Where you'd say, wait a minute, ammunition, that's perfectly legal, right? Well, buying drugs with it might not be legal. And then they just do these things to brainwash parents out there. Ooh, this sounds great. Then they can monitor my kids for me, and I don't have to monitor my kids buying drugs or buying pornography, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is government control. This is the end, and this needs to be stopped. I thank everyone for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families.